Our next speaker, keynote speech, the first one, is Dr. Azmi Sharom. He's the Deputy Chairman of the Election Commission of Malaysia. He holds a PhD in International Environmental Law from University of London School of Rental and African Studies, an LLM from Nottingham and LLB from Sheffield. He previously served as Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Malaya. He also headed the Human Rights Research Group at the same institution. A prolific writer and columnist, his book, Brave New World, Greatest Hits, contains, as the book cover describes, and I quote, groovy chapters on politics, education, race relations, law, and many more. And with 2 original songs as well, included in the book. His other books include Human Rights and Democracy in Indonesia and Malaysia, Challenging the Norms and Pushing the Boundaries. He's quite well acquainted with controversies and Malaysia's infamous Sedition Act as well. Dr. Azmi is known for his incisive and often biting commentary, but at the same time humorous and fair. So it is my pleasure to welcome our first keynote speaker, Dr. Azmi Sharom. Please welcome.
Thank you, Naz. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I was a bit late because I got lost and I ended up in the bowels of Monash. And I swear I was going to die. There's a Santa Claus just standing there. It's extremely frightening. And anyway, I will be speaking about data and democracy in the context of the Election Commission of Malaysia. Now, that is your warning. Because if you want to leave for the next half an hour, I completely understand. I can't imagine a more boring topic. However, if you choose to stay, let me assure you that I was teaching for 30 years at University of Malaya. I'm used to people falling asleep on me. I will not take offense. Malaysia is very digitally connected. 96.8% of us are connected online. 89.3% of us use WhatsApp. And 26.8 million of us are active 26.8 million of us are active social media users. That is 79% of our population use social media. I'm very pleased to say that I'm one of the elite 21% who do not use social media and never will. Now, such connectivity raises many issues, many good. Apart from being able to watch football anytime, anywhere, voters can now change their voting address via an app and thus save themselves the trouble of going to the post office and actually talking to a human being. However, I'm here to speak about the problems and the issues that we at the EC face regarding data. Now, before I begin, it will be prudent to point out that what exactly the Election Commission is empowered to do. According to Article 113 of the Federal Constitution, our tasks are 3. And they are to maintain and update the electoral roll, to run elections, and to draw the electoral boundaries. Now, this presentation will therefore be based on these 3 jobs that we have and how it's related to data and the importance of data. The underlying themes will be on the accuracy of data and accessibility to data. Accuracy is important in the context of democracy as we need to ensure that those who can vote are allowed to vote. Furthermore, as far as possible, I believe that the principle of one person, one vote is a worthy ideal which we must strive for. And naturally, in any democracy, accessibility is important for transparency and accountability. Now, let's look at the electoral roll and the kind of issues that we have with it. This country now allows all citizens over the age of 18 to vote, finally. And registration to be a voter is automatic. In the past, you had to make an effort to register as a voter, but not anymore. This is no longer the case. As soon as you turn 18, you're automatically registered as a voter. When automatic registration came into effect, 40% of eligible voters were not registered. Slightly under half of us. Almost overnight, the number of voters jumped from approximately 14 million to over 20 million voters. So that was a huge jump. And today, around 40,000 voters are automatically registered every month. That's those who have turned 18. The main issue here is the accuracy of the data. The Election Commission uses data obtained from the National Registration Department. In other words, we use IC data. That's our source of data. When we registered the 40% a few years ago, and as we continuously register the newly adult, all our information comes from the National Registration Department. So in other words, we are end users of data. We're not creators of data. We're end users of data. Just how accurate is this data? By and large, it's quite accurate. Before the NRD sort of like, attacks me. By and large, they are accurate, but there are problems. All right, before I continue, are there any participants from Sabah? Please raise your hand, do not be shy. Any Sabahans here? Because if there are Sabahans, they're going to attack me. As Sabahans tend to do. Right? Because I've got to tell you, right? Okay, no Sabahans, but I will represent them. There might be oh my goodness. Is this online?
Yes.
Oh, this is... this is very frightening. Now, I'm aware that many Sabahans are concerned about the legitimacy of those who have Malaysian identity cards. Many a time, I have been asked if the EC can do anything about it. I'm not trying to shift responsibility, but really it's not our job to determine the citizenship of a person. When we are faced with a document, which is a legal document, your IC, what are we going to do? And I've asked many people this, do you really want to give the Election Commission the power to say this IC is no good? I think that will cause a lot more problems than it will solve. So much so if there are any Sabahans online watching, I understand your frustration, but really it's not something which I think the Election Commission can deal with. And it's probably not something that it's desirable for us to deal with. We need experts for this, not us. Anyway, moving on. The problem with IC data is that there is no standardized... I'm sorry, is it meant to be this dark? Yeah, I'm getting old. I can't see my own speech. Thanks, Nas. Moving on. The problem with IC data is that there is no standardized addressing system. So our postcode system is extremely crude. Our postcodes, it's designed really for the post offices. The postcode is basically the area which the individual post office have their jurisdiction. It's not like the postcode in, say, the UK, where the postcode is virtually your address, right? Our postcode is just basically the area for the local post office. That's what our postcodes are. So our addressing system is quite crude. The inaccuracy means that we could get anomalies, especially when determining a voter's locality. What is a locality? A locality is an area within a constitution, and the locality determines where you vote, which voting center you go to. So my locality, for example, determines that I go and vote in Sekolah Sultan Alam Shah, or in Petaling Jaya Section 11. Now, I go there because that's my locality. Addresses with no house numbers, especially if it's on a very long road, means it's difficult for us to determine exactly where a person's locality is. And then there are overly general addresses. I could give you some, but I'll just make one up. So for example, Azmi Sharom, Kampung Badak Bulat, Kedah. That doesn't help us. But that is those are sometimes the kind of addresses that we get, although I think the problem is getting less. The same goes when people do not change their polling address and the address on their IC is no longer in existence. So for example, the Pekeliling flats in KL, it's gone, but some people still have Pekeliling flats on their ICs because they haven't changed it. This will lead to questions of ghost voters coming from places long gone. You know, how can a person come from this place? It's not there anymore. It must be a spirit. Ghost voters also come in the form of the abnormally old and the dead. So last election, last general election, we've been having so many elections. When I say last election, I don't know which one it is. The last election, for example, I got a message with a picture of an obituary. And a very furious person complained that his father had passed away, but he's still on the voter list, voter roll. And the obituary was the proof, right? Upon investigation, we found that his death was never registered with the NRD. So if it's not registered, the relevant information doesn't come to us. And so the name remains on the roll. You know, so what about the very old? You know, there's some very, very old people around. Some still want to be politicians, but you know, but there's some even older than that, you know. I mean, there's some people on the electoral roll who make Yoda look like Grogu. All right? So even now, there are complaints about, you know, these very, very aged people who are lurking in our electoral rolls. But once again, the problem is this. If the family doesn't report their death, we don't get the information and we don't strike out the names. So there's been suggestions. Why don't you just strike out those who are really, really old? All right, just strike them out. I mean, nobody lives that long, right? Well, we hope nobody lives that long. Some people shouldn't be living anymore. Just strike it out, man. If it goes beyond a certain point, which is logical, strike it out. Yes, I suppose we could do that, but there is a fear that some really, really, really old but sprightly guy turns up at the polling booth and say, why is my name not on the electoral roll? So unless we get legitimate and proper confirmation that someone has died, it's something that we're not very comfortable in doing. And I can understand that. You never know what's going to happen, right? Now, with regard to accessibility to the electoral roll, every month the supplementary roll is open for examination. The supplementary roll is the updated roll we put together every month. It used to be every quarter. So forgive me for boasting, but I think this is quite an improvement. Anyway, the supplementary roll is open for examination in case anyone wants to make an objection on people who have changed their polling address. You can't object to people who are registered. No longer. In the past, you could. You could actually object to new registrations. But now, because of automatic registration, there's no objection for that anymore. But you can object for people who you think have not moved where they said they moved. So for example, if Naz changed his address next door to mine, and I know that the house next door, there's nothing living there except a flock of seagulls, I can raise an objection. Right? So the roll is open for, the supplementary roll is open for people to have a look at it. Once the objection period is over, then this access is taken away, but the electoral roll is still accessible, but you have to pay for it. You have to buy it. There is accessibility, but it's pricey. It's a bit pricey, I admit that. One point to be made here, the data sold is limited. We don't give every single detail of the voter, right? So for example, you have the name, you have part of the IC number, not the entire IC number. Don't worry, if somebody's buying a mobile phone on your IC, it's not the fault of the Election Commission. And what else is there? Yeah, the locality and the house number. So the data that we do sell is limited. One issue that has come up is the security of our electoral roll data. That means when we keep it, not the stuff that we sell, but the stuff that we have, can people hack into it? There have been some news reports of data put on sale, and they say it came from us. and, which is very important, which is possible. It could have come from us because we sell it. Yeah, if you came from us, yeah, we sold it. But a lot of this data has details that we don't give out or we don't sell. So sometimes when you get news like this, it's possible that they combine data from other sources as well. But with regards to actual hacking, we don't really have, there's been investigations, we can't find anything yet. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened. I'm not making excuses, but so far we haven't found anything. There are things like firewalls and things like that, which I have no understanding of whatsoever, but there are apparently security measures which are quite strong, as they assure me. I don't know, I can't test it. So with regards to data accuracy, it's very, very clear that we have to work on this. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. It has to be something which is interagency. We have to work with the NRD, and we have to work with other agencies which in the future might have a role to play with regards to data. For example, with addressing. It might not be the NRD, it might be other agencies working on that. So we have to work closely to improve it. That is an ongoing process. Now, what about the running of elections? Here, the concern is the type of information that floats around and spreads very quickly during elections. There are some types of information which may fall under the Election Offences Act. We don't have the term hate speech. The term hate speech does not exist in the Election Offences Act, but we do have offences of promoting feelings of ill will or hostility, where if it is an offence to make statements with a view or with a tendency to promote feelings of ill will, discontent, or hostility between persons of the same race or different races, or of the same class or different classes. So that exists. So if this was to occur, if someone thinks that something like this has happened, then they have to make a police report, and further action or no further action will then be taken. However, this provision was made at a time when online activity was not envisaged. And perhaps it is time to scrutinize the law and see if there's a need for change. The Election Offences Act is very much based on things that happen in the real world. It wasn't designed with the internet in mind. It's also limited because the Election Offences Act only applies to a time that before, during, or after the election, and this is not defined. So, all sorts of information, if it goes beyond that period, then it's not within the Election Offences Act. What about false data? What about, regarding a candidate or party? What about that kind of stuff? There's no law really, apart from general laws of defamation, etc. And where the Election Commission is concerned, we have decided as a matter of policy to take proactive action, by which I mean we publish a correction on our own social media, on our own websites. But only on matters false, when there's false news regarding the electoral process. So that's our current policy. If there's something out there which says, for example, the election has been cancelled, we will deal with that. But we won't deal with stuff dealing with candidates or parties. That is the stand that we're taking now, simply because there is there's a very real possibility that we would be accused of being partial, one way or the other. So for example, if there is a tweet or a Musk X or whatever it's called now, floating about saying, the election is cancelled, fine, that we will deal with. But if there's one that says that this candidate is such and such, we're not going to deal with that. That's the policy we have now. I mean, you can criticize me for that if you want. That's why I'm here. Electoral boundaries, last one. I'm almost done. Firstly, let me be clear that I'm well aware that there's great disgruntlement regarding electoral boundaries. I know. Namely, malapportionment and gerrymandering. Right, these two things. Yes. I'm aware. We have a responsibility to limit or at least keep to a minimum such things. But to a certain extent, our hands are tied. So parliamentary seats are determined by the federal constitution. And it's not balanced at all, according to population. Perlis, for example, has 3 parliamentary seats. But the number of voters in Perlis is less than the number of voters in PJ. Sabah and Sarawak are extremely overrepresented. Selangor and Terengganu are underrepresented. Okay? This is not a criticism before anyone online decides to kill me. It's just the way it is. It's just the constitution. All right? And of course, Malaysia Agreement 1963. All right? There's nothing we can do about that. Nothing. The best we can do is make things more balanced within each state. That's the best we can do. We can't have a constituency which is equal nationally, the size of constituency. We cannot make the sizes of constituency equal nationally. The best we can do is that make it more or less equal within each state. The problem is that many voters live in one place but vote in another. The false changing of voting address is harder now. Right? Before there used to be, a concern that people just change their voting address according to where they are paid to change their voting address. But that's difficult now because in order to change your polling address, you need to change your IC address. So your IC must have a new address. We don't accept anything else anymore. Right? And to change your IC address is a bit tougher than before because you have to have proof that you are living in a particular place, a new place. However, many either do not change their IC address, or even if they do, they don't let us know that they've changed their IC address, and so their polling address remains their old polling address. This means that some constituencies have far more voters than is actually reflected in the electoral roll. And this will affect things like monetary allocations, etc., as well as not accurately reflecting the level of malapportionment. So that is an issue that we have. And again, that unfortunately, it's something which legally people are allowed to do that. Constitutionally, people are allowed to do that. We vote according to domicile, not according to residence. Oftentimes, I get quite irritated by criticisms about certain things, like, for example, why? Okay, I'm going to put myself in serious danger here. Why is it that the Election Commission doesn't make it easier for people who live far away to vote? Right? I'll get that every now and then. So, okay, dude, we don't make it harder for you. You can vote anywhere you live. It's up to you to change where you want to vote. But if you want to vote far, far away, then you vote far, far away. Every time I've moved house, I've changed my address, I've changed my polling address because that's where I'm resident. That member of parliament is representing me, not the member of parliament of Glugor, where the last time I lived was in 1989. Right? But the law allows us to do that, and so unfortunately, that's the way it is. Also, I get a lot of stuff like, why do we make postal votes easier, like America? I said, dude, the Americans know who their candidate is months before. The Americans also know when the election is years before, because it's fixed. Our elections, as you all well know, can happen as and when the politicians figure they will like an election. Right? Okay, let's have one next week. Woohoo! Right? Let's dissolve parliament now. The longer I'm in this job, the more I dislike politicians. I have mentioned some of the issues and problems that the EC faces with regards to data, but I would like to finish on a more general note. Open data. Big thing. Or as open as possible is a necessary thing in a mature democracy. There are government policies on this matter, such as the Open Data Policy of 2015 and the Data Sharing Policy of 2021, respectively Pelaksanaan Data Terbuka Sektor Awam dan Dasar Perkongsian Data Sektor Awam. But much discretion is still left in the hands of the respective agencies. A mindset change coupled with strong leadership is needed for these policies to truly take hold. Perhaps a freedom of information law will help, because the agencies and the civil servants might be more willing to make data accessible rather than having to deal with individual requests on an ad hoc basis. Perhaps that will help. But data is something which, in my experience, guarded very jealously, when it shouldn't be. Whatever it is, we need to change and we need to adapt, because data, its gathering, storage, and accessibility will continue to change as technologies change. And this has to be done with the underlying principle that democracy must be served. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Azmi. As he said, the business of the Election Commission might be mundane and technical, but it is the fundamental right in a democracy. It is the pillar, it is the bloodline of democracy. The fact that everyone can have one vote that is equal, and so many of the ideals which may be constitutionally impossible is how the way it is. But I think it's something we can aspire to. I'm also glad that you can have some time to say out some grievances in a way. It's a tough job, you know. Right. So we do have a little bit of time. Do you mind, Azmi, if we have some questions from the audience? Put you in more trouble. So is there any questions from the audience? Yes, Dr. Loga. All the way back there.
Hey, Loga, how are you?
Apologies, I have to repeat the question. There seems to be a trend about lately there should not be any statements made about the 3R. And I think that is a very welcomed trend, so that it does not invoke any troubled situation. Your comment, please, about the 3R. To what extent do you think this is being complied with, or to what extent the candidates themselves are complying with it, so on and so forth? Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, look, cheers. I'm not a prof anymore, yeah, so just call me Azmi. And actually, I was never a prof. They never promoted me. Yeah, the 3R thing. I mean, okay, for me, the issue here is the balance between the freedom of speech and some sort of control, of course, right? And the I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad, all right, okay, but what I'm going to say is that when we're dealing with things like this, the issue is definition. And it can be, you know, it can be problematic. All right, so unless we're clear as to what we mean by 3Rs, all right. So let me give you an example. I think I fell into one of the Rs when I got into trouble all those years ago. Although I never actually said anything about that R, but I think that's the only reason why I got, you know, the Sedition Act thrown at me, was because I think it was an R, which I offended. All right? Even though I didn't mean to do it, even though I didn't specifically say anything about it as such, right? But, you know, so when you have laws which restrict speech, I think you have to be very, very careful. I understand the concerns, the fears, you know, people get nasty, and over the last few years, people are nastier than ever, right? But for me, it boils down to definition, because it's very risky to restrict even further the rather limited freedom of speech that we have. Okay. Is that it's fine if you don't. Like I said, I was teaching for 30 years. I usually don't get any questions at all.
Any other question?
All right, very, very cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.